Good morning, good morning, good morning, and welcome back to another episode of the Mysticism Decoded podcast. I am your host, Aleph Lev. In this episode, we're going to shed some light on the mysterious drone situation that people are saying is just in New Jersey and other parts of the Northeast. But we're about to see that that's not the case. This is actually a global phenomena, and we're going to see as well that some of these are indeed government drones, and some of them are not. They are good old UFO, UAP. They are exhibiting technology and behavior that we've always said are part of UAP, as in traveling the distance of miles within seconds, being able to hover silently. And in this particular case, we're getting a lot of video from just regular people, not only with cell phone camera footage or video camera footage, but some people are actually able to take footage with very, very expensive, high quality stuff that gets very, very detailed, and it's showing some stuff that you have not seen before. So I aggregated together a couple of things for you guys. One is from The Angry Astronaut. This is a pretty good channel, and he did a good compilation of video footage that shows that these are definitely UAP. Like I said, at least some of them. We know, for example, that it's been reported that we're seeing red and green lights on a number of them, but those are obviously man-made, government. Those are adhering to FAA regulations, but more than likely, those have been sent up to actually investigate the real UAP that are up there, the UAP that have been around for something like almost a month now, not over just New Jersey, over other states in the Northeast. We've heard about them over Oregon, and now we're also going to hear from News Nation, and I got a clip for you guys here too, that this is being reported globally. This is not a New Jersey or Northeast phenomena. So people that are trying to say, oh, this is only just our government, no, it is not. It is being reported globally. And we also know that these are being reported hovering over our sensitive military infrastructure, over military bases, over places where it's reported that we are housing nuclear weapons. And then perhaps most interestingly, I have something to show you guys from this person named Clif High, where he actually predicted this exact thing, a drone invasion, a month before it actually occurred. And he did this with predictive software that he created over 10 years ago. It gets pretty technical and detailed, but I have a clip for you guys from there too. And the 39 days that I refer to in my title, in his software, it was predicted that 39 days after what would be a Trump and Rogan interview, that there would be a visible contention, as he calls it, which is the drone swarm invasion. And this happened within the 39 days, as predicted, way in advance. And then the question is, well, what is going to happen next? And as Clif High is going to explain from his software, the next step, unfortunately, perhaps is melee, which is not good because that basically means absolute chaos. But first, let's take a look at this video coming from The Angry Astronaut that he put together of different video footage. And then I'm going to get into a little bit why it is that we're not shooting them down. It's because we can't shoot them down for multiple reasons. But let's take a look at this first clip now.
As you can see, drones can perform some very impressive displays in the night sky, and we can understand why this could sometimes be mistaken for UFOs or some other type of bizarre sighting when it's really something quite mundane, especially with today's technology. But some of the sightings that have been taking place lately have been verified by multiple witnesses and oftentimes even caught on camera, have demonstrated capabilities that are far beyond what these drones that you're watching now or just about any other commercially available drone could possibly accomplish. And even military drones are incapable of flying at the altitudes and speeds that have been described by some of these witnesses. Now, according to New Jersey Assemblywoman Dawn Fantasia, who attended a closed-door meeting on Wednesday with other state leaders and representatives from the Department of Homeland Security, there have been reports ranging from 4 to 180 sightings per night. The drones apparently operate in a coordinated manner and again have not been identified as hobbyist drones or any that are related to the Department of Homeland Security. So again, when we're talking about large drones the size of, say, an SUV, as have been described by some of these witnesses, and by the way, I think that's what we're looking at right now, to get a license to operate these types of drones is a very difficult thing to do, and the FAA has comprehensive lists of operators who are authorized to use drones like this, and it would be pretty easy to track these operators down if they were using these types of drones in close proximity to sensitive federal installations. However, according to the White House National Security spokesman John Kirby, there's nothing to be concerned about. He claims that many of these reported drone sightings appear to be lawfully operated manned aircraft, and he's probably correct about that. However, he goes on to say, quote, "We have no evidence at this time that the reported drone sightings pose a national security or public safety threat or have a foreign nexus. The Department of Homeland Security and the FBI are investigating these sightings, and they're working closely with state and local law enforcement to provide resources using numerous detection methods to better understand their origin. That said, we certainly take seriously the threat that can be posed by unmanned aircraft systems, which is why law enforcement and other agencies continue to support New Jersey and investigate the reports, even though they have uncovered no malicious activity or intent at this particular stage." By the way, he also says that these objects have not trespassed into secured federal airspace. However, Mine Hill Mayor Sam Morris, who's one of the elected officials in Morris County in New Jersey, is not convinced about that at all. As a matter of fact, he said that Kirby's remarks were ridiculous. Quote, "So what that means, he's saying that we're seeing small planes. That's my take on that, and I have to tell you, I'm incredulous about that. I would invite Mr. Kirby to Mine Hill. Come on out, Mr. Kirby, and let's go out one night about 9:30, 10 o'clock. I'll go out behind my town hall, and you can count them with me all night." Boy, I'd love to take this guy up on his invitation, but unfortunately, he lives across the Atlantic. If similar things are currently happening anywhere in the UK, please let me know about it. Put it in the comments, or you can send me an email. I have my email listed in the description. I'd love to follow up on that. But in the meantime, it's becoming quite obvious indeed that whatever is happening seems to defy any mundane explanations anyway. Unless we think that this is something restricted just to the West, or it might be a Chinese operation or something, well, here's a sighting from China.
是不是有 UFO 啊？是什么东西啊？这个是怎么在跑啊？
And what I find to be particularly compelling about this sighting is it was taken from multiple witnesses at multiple camera angles, apparently. Very interesting indeed. And this is not the only example of a recent sighting in countries where we seldom get footage like this. Another example was in Iran. This particular extremely dramatic footage is of a UAP that appeared over an Iranian city, not sure where, but an attempt was made, as you can see quite obviously, to bring it down. Lots and lots of anti-aircraft fire, and yet it didn't seem to have any significant effect on the object in question. But probably the most compelling sighting that, in my opinion, proves that these objects, at least some of them, are not mundane objects or conventional drones, perhaps not even military drones, can be found in a recent sighting in the Pacific Northwest, where several air crews observed a phenomena that none of them could explain.
Okay, 1596.
Okay, so that was the first video. And as you can see, the most interesting part about that compilation was that in Iran, they actually fired anti-aircraft missiles at these quote-unquote drones, which we know are UAP. And you saw it didn't even get close. Did not even get close. It either was shot down or it exploded by what seems to be like an invisible energy shield, or it just missed. So I wonder why this footage of Iran trying to shoot at the drones is not more widespread right now, but that is major. So if we're asking ourselves, why isn't the US shooting at these things? It's because they can't. There's nothing they could do. We just saw what happens whenever you send dozens and dozens of anti-aircraft missile at it. It doesn't even phase it. So we can't shoot them down, not with our publicly known technology anyway. If we were going to escalate to the point of maybe we could compete with them at some level, it would probably require that the government now shows their hand and shows what secret technology that they have, because they're not bringing them down with just the regular stuff. Now, this next clip comes from News Nation that I wanted to show you from our well-known friend Ross Coulthart. And he's going to explain that this isn't a Northeast America phenomenon. This is global. So let's take a look at this clip as well and see what Ross has to say.
Hello and welcome to this News Nation primetime special investigating the drones mystery unfolding in our skies. For months now, there have been mystery objects hovering over US airspace, including over sensitive US military facilities and increasingly over crowded civilian areas such as New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and other parts across the continental USA. Tonight, we're going to try and get answers for you. My name is Ross Coulthart. I'm based in Australia, and it's part of the reason why we're telling you this story, because it's a worldwide phenomenon. It's not just happening in the US, it's happening in almost every country in the world. And what's becoming patently clear is the White House, the FBI, and all of the investigative agencies have no answers. So tonight, we're on the ground trying to get you those answers.
Okay, so you just heard Ross Coulthart right there. And I'm going to put links for all these videos in the description, so if you want to watch them in full. But he's going to talk about how these drones are being seen in Australia, New Zealand, Russia, China, Iran. Like I said, in America, we've already heard New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Pennsylvania. They've also been reported in Oregon. That's getting no coverage at all. But what's also interesting is that in recent years, we've had drone issues too. And they're really the same thing. It's not being connected in mainstream media on a widespread basis as of yet, but I have heard it said. So what was it, maybe a year ago, that we had drones over Langley Air Force Base in Virginia for a month? a month. Langley is responsible for protecting Washington, D.C., the capital area. That's one of the most important Air Force bases in the entire country. So that should tell you everything you need to know right there. And for that entire month over Langley, they were also not shot down. So whenever you hear, oh, they're not going over restricted airspace, that's absolute BS. They are going above our most important facilities, infrastructure, and nuclear weapons storage sites. Now, the next clip I want to play for you guys, this is extremely interesting. It gets very technical, and it somewhat enters the world of sci-fi just a little bit. So to give the context, this guy, Clif High, who's a very smart individual, unfortunately, he's also blatantly anti-Semitic, and as smart as he is, he just can't extend that intelligence to viewing Jews in Israel. And the reason I bring this up is because he actually takes the same stance as me regarding Elohim. So if you've watched any of my prior pods, I bring this up in many of them, that the Elohim, the God or gods of the Bible, this is a mistranslation, and it is a different concept and entity of the all-creator God that I refer to as Ein Sof. That is the Kabbalistic term for the creator God. Ein Sof meaning no end or infinite in Hebrew. And this, of course, has to do with ancient astronaut theory. So Zecharia Sitchin, scholars like this. And he understands that the Elohim are the Anunnaki, as do I, but he only perceives the negative implications out of this. So like I've said, the Anunnaki are not perfect beings. We are created from them, as in where it says in the Bible, we made them in our image. We, plural, are plural. We literally look like them, and our characteristics are similar to theirs, let's say in personality, love, joy, anger, rage, etc. So these aren't perfect beings. And obviously, whenever it comes to the Bible, we have beautiful, great, loving things that come out of it. But we also have things like the ordainment of slavery. There's rules for slavery. There are laws dictating that if someone else worships another god, that they should be slaughtered, man, woman, and child, things like this. So obviously there's parts about the Bible that religious people, they like to gloss over typically and not think about it too much, that aren't so pretty. But then we have the beautiful aspects as well, such as the story of Genesis, such as the angel Gabriel coming to Daniel and telling him that his prayers were heard as soon as he thought them, and he's beloved. And then especially what I focus on, the books of mysticism, specifically Judeo-Christian mysticism, Kabbalah, and Merkavah. We have beautiful stories, again, of Genesis, but also interaction between the Elohim and humanity, or the ETs and humanity, and the ETs being specifically the Anunnaki. But he takes this prism, or the idea of the Elohim being the Anunnaki, and he focuses completely on the negative aspects. And for some reason, even though it would seem that he understands that the gods of all religions are Anunnaki, or equivalently Elohim, which they are, he says that the Jewish people are to blame for all the world's problems and are traitors to the species of humanity. I don't know how it is that someone so intelligent can understand that the Elohim are the Anunnaki. Anyone who is born into a religion is 99% of the time going to just adhere to their religion, whether you're born Jew, Christian, Muslim, Buddhist, Hindu, etc. people don't typically convert, or even if they're not religious, they just are reform and they don't really do much about it. But to say just because the Anunnaki are the Elohim and the first book of the Abrahamic religions is the Torah, so the Jews are to blame because they set this domino effect, etc., etc. It just doesn't make sense. It's below his intelligence. And I say this because Clif High, he is an interesting individual. He is a good orator. And I started with this video, and because it was so smart and he was a good speaker, I went to go check out some of his other videos, and he has a Substack blog like I do. So I went to check out his Substack, and he is just blatantly, very angrily anti-Semitic, and it just doesn't make sense. So I had to warn you guys about that in case you're going to check out Clif High further. I'm obviously not a supporter of his in every aspect, but this video, it's just too applicable. It is too fascinating. I wanted to share it with you guys. And what he did is essentially he created a software starting, I think it was either in the late 90s or early 2000s, where he basically was using search terms and the volume of certain terms from people coming around the world to predict world events. As to how this happens exactly or how it works exactly, he describes it in this video. It's too technical for me to really explain in my own words. If you're a software programmer or a technical person and you do watch it, please feel free to comment in my comments to give light as to how it works exactly. Now, he doesn't claim that it works properly or accurately all the time. He does say that oftentimes things are way off, but occasionally it is extremely accurate. And in this particular case, back in 2009, even preceding the Joe Rogan podcast, I believe, his software predicted that there would be a drone swarm invasion that occurred in the US, and this would be within 39 days after what he calls a temporal marker. And that temporal marker was the Trump-Rogan interview, because a big part of that interview was UFO, ET, aliens, and disclosure, that the search terms would increase, and that somehow corresponded with a drone swarm invasion happening within 39 days later, which it has. Now, what's fascinating is this guy, Clif, he posted this video a few weeks or maybe a month or so before the drone swarm invasion actually occurred. And he's going to explain that the next aspect of this, after what he calls the visible contention, that is the drone swarm, is that his software foresees and predicts melee. Now, melee is a military term, specifically a naval term, that describes chaos that arrives from a degradation and lack of order and control, instruction, authority, and power. So basically a total, for lack of better words, degradation of society that the federal government loses control of. So let's play this clip and then we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail right after.
And so we had this situation within the data in 2009 that had been reinforced over the years from 2009 through to 2015 that said that 39 days after this TM took place, we would have the big, and this is where Igor and I did our fighting, we would have this visible contention that would dissolve into a melee. And at the time, and even in our even in our conversations here recently, he wanted to say, and I'll title this way in honor of Igor here, but he wanted to say that it was 39 days to melee, which is a catchy phrase. Okay, it'd be a nice title for a book or something. But in my opinion, it's not quite accurate, right? Because we don't know what the distance is between the organized visible contention that then degrades into the melee. That might be months for all we know. But what we do have some justification for suggesting is that there will be 39 days between the temporal marker of the Trump interview and the appearance of this visible contention. And we're not talking, people taking on migrant gangs that are taking over apartment buildings. That kind of visible contention may well be in there, but the stuff that had been motivating me to get hold of Dick Allgaier was the visible contention between space aliens. Okay, so, or whatever, right? Alien reproduction vehicles or whatever the hell. Who knows what's going on? Because we can't validate any of it at this point, right? But the data set said that 39 days after this temporal marker, giant, huge, iconic temporal marker, to be honest, I never thought I would live to actually see it occur. In the interview with Dick Allgaier, I was, had just gone was hanging on and entering into the recovery period, right? And so that took 2019, 2020, 21, and about half of 22. Then I was fit enough to go on to this next phase, which was the rebuilding of my fighting frame by way of building an Aiki body, they call it. You have to go and understand Shinshin Soitsu Aikido, Tohei Sensei, O Sensei, Ueshiba, O Sensei, in the techniques. Okay, and I'm 71 now, and I'm able to rebuild muscle mass, right? It is tedious, it is work. So it's not like it's a pill or anything. It doesn't work that way. But in any event, so I did all of this, right? In this intervening period of time here. Okay, so now we have this temporal marker appearing, but at the time that Dick and I were doing that interview, I knew it would occur, but honestly, 2019, I wasn't sure I was going to survive, right? I was hopeful that there wouldn't be any more crises, but you just never can tell, right? Anyway, though, it was pleasing to have lived at least that long that I saw the linguistics about that temporal marker appear in the media. Now we've got that same set of linguistics again, and apparently we have confirmation that the interview will take place, and therefore we'll have it as a temporal marker itself. And so that sets going a sort of a timer. Bear in mind what I was telling you about how we get these times, right? It's software adding up all of this shit based on all these words, and we're constantly wrong to some great degree. And it varies based on the size of the set, the amount of processing it takes, and yada, yada, yada. So it's not like any kind of guaranteed date or anything, right? It is just, I am alluding to the possibility that there's a short period of time between the, barely over a month, between the temporal marker and the visible contention that will appear in the skies that from the descriptors we had back in 2009, will go to the idea of UFO versus UFO and UFO versus jets. Okay, so like sort of very complex kind of Independence Day kind of shit, right? Nobody will know who the hell is doing what with whom. Now, okay, so you think that's unlikely and so on, as do I. All this shit's always unlikely until it happens. Possible, not probable, right? So anyway, now we have a strange thing where there's swarms of 20-foot drones flying around military bases. So unknown. Nobody knows who owns these drones, who's controlling them. At least they're not telling us guys. I would suspect that the military would be freaking out if they can't see the signals that are directing those drones, and those drones are a kavass weapon, where One of the, okay, so yeah, I won't describe it, but basically you set off a group of drones that don't report back to headquarters until they're all done. Okay, they don't ever say anything back to headquarters at all. All their communications are between the drones. If drone number one that's leading the pack gets taken out just like a flight of geese, then the number two takes over, et cetera, et cetera. That's a particular kind of a design. I worked on something like that in the 70s. And implemented it for some software for the Department of Fisheries in the late 80s, okay? And that software ran 25 years without needing servicing, so to speak, and didn't break down because it was redundant, because it had, you know, if the number one computer went down, the number two took over. And they talked to each other intermittently to say, yeah, I'm here, that kind of thing. So everybody knew what was going on. This is pre-internet. Internet came along and it was just cheaper to discard that software and do it in a, you know, web-based interface. Anyway, so we now have those kind of drones doing their own, I'm gonna go get that, hang on a second.
All right, so you guys get the gist from that part of the clip. He created this software that basically puts together these search terms that people are using, and based on volume, it somehow spits out these predictions. They're oftentimes wrong, but sometimes they're extremely accurate, and this time it was extremely accurate. And a month before we saw the drones, he posted that video. And then we started seeing the drones, and now it's another month since then. And later on in the video, he goes into more detail explaining that the next part of the story is that some months later, but not a tremendous amount of time later, so essentially maybe first quarter of 25 or first half 25, that this degrades into a melee where his software predicts UFO versus UFO battles, as well as jets versus UFO battles. So sort of indicating that, one, we are fighting the drones with our jets, and we are either getting help from another ET group to fight them, or we have our own UFO type vehicles as well that are essentially hidden technology right now. But what is predicted is essentially a war between whoever is operating these drones, which unfortunately you can't say that this is just impossible, because look at what they're doing. They're hovering around our sensitive infrastructure, our military bases, our nuclear weapons bases. They've been doing this for months. It's happening around the entire world, so we can't say that it's Russia, China, Iran, because they're having their own UFO drone crisis. So it really leaves only two scenarios. One is that it's a false flag situation where the government is doing this to scare us and spook us and make us think that there is a UFO war coming so that they could print money for the military industrial complex. And this is the theory that Dr. Stephen Greer really likes to hammer out. And the other side of the coin is it is actually a real threat, and things are going to happen. The actual third scenario, which this is maybe the best case scenario that I'd be hoping for, is that the UFOs themselves are preventing a global nuclear war on Earth, as in the World War III that has been brewing for the last year. I mean, we know what's going on between Israel and Iran and its terror satellites. We know what's going on between Russia and Ukraine. We know that China has designs on taking Taiwan, and things are just spiraling. And it's obviously looking like a global war was in the works. And at this point in technology, with the stakes being what they are, it's easy to extrapolate that this global war would become a global nuclear war. And we've heard for years as well stories of ETs or UFOs hovering around nuclear weapon sites, and in some cases even dismantling them or turning them off. So maybe it is something that's positive for us, where they are preventing a global nuclear war. That'd be the best case scenario. Now, what's scary about Clif High's prediction is that, and this is very, very rare knowledge, but there is a government whistleblower from the Montauk Project Philadelphia experiment, whose name is Al Bielek, that I've mentioned on some of the pods before, that I'm going to get into in more detail on future pods dedicated specifically. But part of Al Bielek's testimony, and again, if you don't understand the science, you don't understand the context, you don't know anything about Philadelphia experiment or Montauk Project, it includes time travel and time travel technology. And one of the things he reported from his personal experiences in time travel, or experiences in the future, is that looking back from that time where he was, that he did see, or it was known, that a global war occurred around 2025, and part of that war was in fact a war between ETs and humanity. Now, I'm not stomping my foot, I'm not slapping the table saying that that is exactly what is going to happen, but I am telling you that this is what Al Bielek said in his autobiography in 2003 or so that he published. And I have the link to it. There are multiple links. I didn't pull it in this video because I'm going to do it specifically on its own separately. But Al Bielek's testimony in 2003 matches what Clif High's software predicted in 2009, which so far has proven to be accurate, at least in the 39-day window between the temporal marker of the Rogan-Trump interview to the UFO drone swarm invasion. So he sees a melee in his prediction, and Al Bielek essentially reported the melee in his experiences regarding the Philadelphia experiment, Montauk Project. So that aligns, that matches. And part of what Clif talks about on his video as well is that he commissioned a remote viewing group. That was the individual he was referring to, Dick Olgeier, I think his name was. But he commissioned a remote viewing group to look at his prediction, and he is saying that remote viewing group essentially confirmed his prediction regarding the UFOs appearing. And I don't remember for sure that they confirmed the melee to come later. I think he just had them confirm the UFO after the temporal marker, the drone invasion. But that's another point of confirmation. So this is getting real Looney Tunes, you might say. But if you've watched my other pods, you also understand that we live in the imagination of God. Ein Sof, the infinite consciousness, is infinitely creative and vibrates at the speed of infinity, allowing for a state of all potentiality. And there are infinite timelines where every high probability outcome takes place and exists in a particular timeline. So it's not impossible that this timeline, if you're watching this video, that you will experience what can only be described as a human ET war, perhaps even in the year 2025. So as sci-fi as this sounds, just remember that the universe is not stranger than you imagine. The universe is stranger than you can imagine. There is a big difference there. Big difference. So we're going to have to wait and see what happens. I'm going to continue to give you updates on this as it progresses. As I've said in my last couple of videos, I'm planning to start my second series on the Sefer Yetzirah, the first book of Kabbalah, meaning the book of creation in English. And it's really covering the second half of my book, Connect to Source, which connects the first book of Kabbalah to the declassified CIA program known as the Gateway Process, which is where remote viewing actually comes from. And the first series I did covers the CIA document in great detail. And now we're going to be getting into the Sefer Yetzirah and connecting it back to the Gateway Process. So if you liked what you saw here, just like everyone else asked for, please like, share, comment, subscribe. I'm going to keep you updated on the UAP phenomena and disclosure in a way that most other people do not. Most other people are not going to connect these prophecies for you, from Al Bielek to Clif High, and they're not going to be able to tie it back for you to ancient texts, as in ancient astronaut theory. The Elohim are the Anunnaki, are the gods of the Bible, are the gods of all religions on this planet, which is a separate concept from the all-creator God, for which the Kabbalistic term exists, Ein Sof. And if you're trying to understand that phonetically in English, that's A-I-N, second word S-O-F. So until next time, thanks for joining me today, guys. I really appreciate it. And the next series is going to really up the ante as we get into the true nature of Genesis, the true nature of the Creator himself, his persona, and very specific things like why the golem is a 100% real entity, not mythical or folklore, the origin story of the shapes of the Hebrew letters, a description of the fifth dimension as it is reported in the Sefer Yetzirah per my interpretation, as I submit to you, by the Hebrew word sipor, meaning to inform, and it's a reference to how the fifth dimension informs or governs the fourth dimension, which is responsible for why we experience time linearly the way we do. So stick with me. Things are about to get exciting. And as we can see, things are already getting very crazy. We are basically entering the sci-fi phase of our reality, our existence on this planet. And ideas that people have held for decades are about to be toppled. People's identity and belief systems are about to be completely shocked. But this is how the consciousness of humanity evolves, and the evolution of consciousness is one of the prime reasons that our reality exists to begin with. Until next time, Aleph Lev out.